Should you train to failure? That is the question. I am Max with Max Performance. Today we're going to talk about training to failure, what training to failure is, the context behind it, who should be training to failure, when you should be training to failure, all that good stuff. Like, comment, subscribe. I won't waste any of your time. Let's get into it. So, what is training to failure? There's a few definitions that people might use. One, you could say training to failure is basically you do a rep and then you know you can't do any more. So, I trained to failure. I did as many reps as I could, almost like an AMRAP set, like a true AMRAP set. The other definition of training to failure is you literally fail mid rep. And I mean, to me, that almost makes a little bit more sense, but when it comes to doing certain movements, failing mid rep is one, potentially dangerous and there's risk of injury, and two, is bad technical practice and is probably not totally necessary. Like a back squat, for example. I mean, you're probably better off not failing mid rep on a back squat from a safety standpoint, and also just because you're teaching yourself poor technique, you're teaching yourself to fail when you're squatting, which is something I believe in. So anyways, it is a bit contextual. I will say this, if you're a beginner, you can stand to train to failure more often because you basically cannot express all the strength you have. Like, just because you can only bench 95 pounds for 5 reps doesn't mean you don't have the potential in you already to bench more. You're just not coordinated enough to express that strength you have effectively. So you can train to failure more often. One, because the load on the bar is not going to be nearly as high. The intensity is just not going to be nearly as high as someone who's well trained. And two, basically, you're not actually training to failure. You have more in you. You literally just can't get it out, if that makes sense. So as a beginner, like on isolation exercises, you could pretty much train everything to failure, every set to failure as much as you want, and you're going to grow, you're going to get stronger. It's not going to dig you in too deep a recovery hole. Compound movements as a beginner, you could probably train to close to failure every single workout on compound lifts. And again, you're just going to stand to get bigger and stronger. Now, as you get more experienced, as you get bigger, and as you get stronger, training to failure starts to negatively affect your recovery more and more and more. So, as a rule of thumb, on isolation exercises, you can still stand to train to failure, especially if the load is not super light and it's like a tricep press down or like a hammer curl. It's like, that's not going to kill you recovery wise. That's not going to stop you from squatting in 2 days. However, if you're like on a high bar squat or something and you're going pretty heavy and you're training to failure, that might affect your next workout. So I'm not saying don't train to failure on compound lifts. And I'm saying like technical failure where you can't do any more reps. What I am saying though is you might want to be mindful of it and keep an eye on it and think about it. Like if you train to failure on Monday and you have to squat again on Friday, think about how you feel when you're squatting again. Do you feel taxed? Like, do you feel like training to failure, that 1 or 2 sets really did it for you? If it didn't, then cool, then you don't have much to worry about. But if it did, then maybe you don't want to train as close to failure as often. So that's all I'm getting at. And we'll say, like, bottom line, should you be training to failure sometimes on some exercise? 100%. You should be in people might cite like scientific literature saying, well, you can leave like 1 or 2 reps in reserve and it's like basically the same thing, which that might be true. But sometimes you just got to train to failure for fun, just to see where you're at and just to push yourself, like that some of that lifting where it's like you're so meticulous and you're so afraid to do anything too crazy. It almost like, I don't know, you're not pushing yourself. You could push yourself more. So I don't know. Training to failure is fun, and you should be pushing yourself a little bit, and you get something out of it. I guess that's what the point I want to make is it's a compensated behavior. You're compensated for it in one way or another, whether it's strength, size, mental strength, whatever. It's like you're going to get something out of it. So, bottom line, yes, you should be training to failure, but you should be mindful and cognizant of when and where and what you're training to failure on. And you should be keeping kind of like a tally in the back of your head on and analyzing how you feel when you are training to failure often to see how it's affecting your other workouts. Because maybe you want to cut back a little bit, taper down a little bit, and pepper it in a little more strategically. So I'm Max with Max Performance. Thank you for watching the video. Let me know in the comments what you think as far as training to failure goes. I'll talk to you in the next one.